It's supposed to be the most wonderful time of the year, and the reminders are everywhere. The Christmas carols blasting over the mall loudspeakers, the holiday parties and the work potlucks, the steady stream of Hallmark movies with happy endings. But what happens when you aren't feeling that joy? What happens when you're grieving the death of a loved one, a broken relationship, when you or a loved one is ill or you're feeling lonely and isolated? I'm Nicole Huck, and today on Blue Sky, we're making space for it all.
Initially, I tried to fight it. I tried to say, you know what, we're going to only feel joy. This is going to be a great time of year. It's going to be a party. Yeah, let's do it.
How'd that go for you?
It did not go well.
Yeah.
Did not go well. Broke down so fast because when you try to force joy, you're not giving your brain that chance to say, this is really hard.
We'll hear from a Regina woman who is celebrating what is expected to be her last Christmas with her mom. We'll hear from a minister who has a special Blue Christmas service planned at her church. And we'll hear from people who are well-versed in supporting people through their grief and have suggestions for how to hold space for all the emotions you may be feeling. So today, for the next 50 minutes, we're creating a safe space for people who need to know that they aren't grieving alone. And whether you are experiencing your own Blue Christmas or want to better support family and friends who are having a hard time, this show is for you. So I have three guests with me today, and Jennifer Krall is the minister at Broadway United Church in Regina. Tomorrow night, she's holding a Blue Christmas service at her church. It's one of many Blue Christmas services being held across the province. Jennifer, welcome to Blue Sky.
Thank you so much for having me, Nicole.
You're welcome. Right beside me is Danielle Renaud. She's a registered psychotherapist and director of education and programming through Caring Hearts. They offer support and counseling to people who've experienced grief, loss, and trauma. Danielle, welcome to Blue Sky.
Thank you for having me.
You bet. And Tara Osipoff knows what it's like to experience a profound loss at this time of year. 18 years ago today, she lost her brother. And more recently, she lost her aunt and best friend. Tara has channeled some of that grief and subsequent healing into a podcast. It's called You're Meant to Be Here. And Tara, I'm glad you're with us today.
Thank you so much for having me.
Tara, I want to start with you because, as we just said, today is a big day in your family. It's the anniversary of your brother's death. And I can't imagine how difficult that first Christmas must have been. But how are you feeling today?
You know, over the years, grief changes and takes different forms and shapes. And I will say that you can prepare as much as you want for your D-Day, as I call the anniversary, but the emotions that come up that day differ every year. Sometimes it's acceptance, sometimes it's anger, sometimes it's deep sadness, and sometimes it's even grief joy. And so...
What's grief joy?
Grief joy to me it's what I call my current state of grieving. And having experienced so many deep losses, and especially with my brother, I learned a lot about the value of life. And I think grief carves a hole in you, and you have the ability to fill it with whatever you want. And the hard part is that you have to be really intentional if you want it to bring fulfillment to your life. And so over the last 18 years, I did a lot of therapy and work, and I've learned to fill that space that grief has carved out with joy. And grief has taught me to love life more and be more present and have more compassion. And I know people say live, each day to your fullest, but I try to shoot my shot every day. And that's what grief joy means to me.
It can be tricky, right? Like we can know in our head that you're supposed to live each day like it's your last. But then you can turn like 5 minutes passes and you're getting mad at somebody for something silly. How do you feel like you've changed as a person? Has it been a practice of actually being able to be that gratitude? I guess it's a gratitude practice. Have you been intentional about that?
Oh my gosh, yes. I was just speaking with my dad this morning, given that it is the D-Day of my brother, and I'm sure I'll speak with my mom as well, and we talk about, everything that happened that day. And I think back of the person I was then and who I am now, and that is a different human being. And I always call it before Brian and after Brian. That was my brother's name. And the person I was before doesn't exist anymore. And that's okay. I've grieved her too. And the person that I am now has transformed from, a deeply grieving person into a person that has an immense amount of gratitude and appreciation for life. When my brother passed away, I was sharing with my dad this morning, I have this tattoo on my arm that says, "This too shall pass." And when he first passed away, I was so depressed. I was 21 and he was 22, and he died suddenly, so it was unexpected. And I remember my dad coming into my room, almost every day and saying, "This too shall pass, Tara," which is what the tattoo says. And he was right. No emotions last, and the pain didn't last. But now it's completely transformed, and it means everything passes. Joy, this moment here with you both, will pass too. And so it's a reminder of being present in this very moment, because nothing lasts, and that's part of it.
I want to give you an opportunity to tell us a little bit about Brian. When you're talking to your dad today, what are some of the stories or memories that you have of Brian that you start talking about?
Yeah, it's interesting because I don't know if everyone who experiences deep loss feels this way, but I don't carve out a ton of space every day to think about the deep details of him. Now, I will say he's subconsciously there with me and in the back of my mind, and the things I do and choices I make are definitely with him in mind. But today is a day where I think back on who he was, and I look through photos. And he died just after 10 a.m., around there. That's kind of when I found out. And at that time, every year, I look through all the photos and think about him. And, he was wise beyond his years. And I don't know, everyone believes something different, but I really believe it was his time. He was adventurous more than you should be at that age, and very, very wise. He wanted to learn about religion, so he went to a bunch of different churches to learn. He was so curious. He thought he gifted me the book The Secret, which, at 22, most kids aren't reading.
Yeah.
And so he was just, he lived a lot of life. He packed a lot into those 22 years, and I feel like taught me a lot in his life and in his death. And he taught me to be uniquely myself, and that was okay and lovable. So I have a lot of gratitude for what he's gifted me.
Do you still remember what that first Christmas was like? I mean, you're
Yes.
thinking back to this day, but do you remember even the whole season?
Of course, yes. Thank you for asking. I like to think about that day, even though it's painful. I think pain can be part of what carves out compassion. So, and even when you're at the grocery store this season, think about what people might be going through in the aisle next to you. And I say that because I remember it was December 17th when he passed away suddenly, and I was 21 and he was 22, and we were best friends. So it was deeply devastating to me. And we had gone to the grocery store, maybe within a week to get some things, and it was within a mall. And I remember thinking, like, all these people are buying gifts and meals for this happy event, and my whole world has been ripped apart and turned upside down. And it seems like my world is completely still, and everyone else's is just going about their lives. And that seems so complex and confusing to me. And you're almost like in a psychosis. It feels like it's not even real. And I think whether you lost your person in December or another time, that first Christmas without them, those first memories are deeply, deeply hard to move through, making those moments.
I know that you've developed a lot of skills over the years, and you volunteered at the bereavement center. Mm-hmm. What drew you to wanting to do that?
Yeah, I think that grief has changed me in such profound ways, and I wanted to be able to gift that to other people. Now, it's not something that happens right away. It takes a lot of time, and I will say I spent a lot of years sad, angry, mad, and moving through the emotions of grief. Thankfully, the bereavement center taught me about those emotions, and that it's not linear, and healing isn't linear. And Marlene Jackson, I think she might be an angel on earth. She's one of the therapists, I believe, was at the bereavement center, and she really helped me, and I wanted to help other people too. And so giving back was a really big part of my healing journey, and it's why I started my podcast, which is called You're Meant to Be Here. My hope is that I could give tools back to people who move through different things in their life without them having to experience it. And grief comes in many forms: loss of a job, divorce, friendships ending, the physical loss of someone. And it's more so about not just about moving through grief and having those tools, but how do you actually live a more fulfilling life while you're here? So that's really my goal with the podcast, and giving back to people who are experiencing pain is how do you actually take that pain and shape it into something that gives you more meaning and fulfillment?
Danielle, I'd like to bring you in here right now. Danielle is with Caring Hearts. Maybe for people who don't know what Caring Hearts is, you can just describe what you do.
Sure. So Caring Hearts, we're a nonprofit organization in Saskatchewan. We're actually the only exclusive organization working with loss, trauma, and grief in the province. We do a lot of different types of group work. We do individual family therapy. We partner with a lot of other community networks and even like for-profit corporations as well. So pretty much anyone dealing with any of those subcategories, grief, loss, trauma, as Tara had mentioned, that can come in many, many different forms. So not just the loss of a physical person, but also, like different types of traumatic loss that happens sometimes as work accidents around the province, different life transitions, a lot of those different things. So we have a lot of avenues on how to support folks, and I'm here to maybe support this conversation however I can.
No, I think about that like every day in the news.
Yeah.
Every time we hear someone dying, every story, I'm like, somebody's life is dramatically changed.
Yeah.
This family is trying to figure out how they move on right now or how they pick up these pieces right now. But especially at this time of year, for sure. Every time I hear about a workplace death or, an accident on the roads, I'm thinking about how these families are going to be navigating this time of year. But what makes it particularly, is it actually harder right now? Is it harder during holidays for people than experiencing grief at any time?
Yeah, that's an interesting question. I think it's probably going to be pretty person-specific as well. I think what Tara mentioned, and I think is a pretty common theme throughout people experiencing grief and just grief in general, is that, your individual experience is standing, but everything else is still happening. Everything else is going on. And so whether that's Christmas or whether it's Valentine's Day or a wedding anniversary or something important to you or your loved one, or maybe an experience that you're missing or grieving at that moment, there's always going to be a transition that's taking place for you as your individual, your family system, or what's important or happening in your world. And everything else is kind of systemically or socially continuously happening. And so then, as Tara kind of alluded to, how am I coping with what's happening around me with my individual circumstance, and then also as times maybe moving on or moving forward, acknowledging that maybe grief doesn't always get easier or lighter sometimes, and how am I maybe making meaning in this or finding ways to include that person or remember that experience that maybe is not present with me here. Yeah, so it's a little different person to person.
Let's talk about that. I know both of you have kind of tools in the toolbox or different things that you've done to carve out that space or make sure that people have a way of even tangibly putting their memories into, whether it be an ornament or whatnot. But tell me about some of the suggestions that you have for people who are looking for maybe some ritual or a way of bringing that into their family time at this time of year.
So one of the things that my family does for my brother, my mom and I build a wreath every year that we put on his grave. And this year I pulled some things from around the community and things that are around me to bring what I'm experiencing into his world.
What kind of things did you do?
There's some berries and stuff from the neighborhood and some different kind of foliage that I've gathered. And the wreath represents the circle of everlasting love that we have for him, and that just because he's physically not here doesn't mean that he isn't with us, and that love doesn't die with the physical body. And so that's a really important representation for us. And then also, and some years I will say, it's too heavy and we buy a wreath, and that's okay too, because every year it shows up differently. For my aunt, we have candles we made with her before she passed, as she knew she was going to pass away, and we burn them at Christmas time because people are making memories with these loved ones, whether it's their brother, their mom, their person, and you don't get to. And that's where that feels that emptiness and hole, at least for me. And I want to feel like they're with me too. So that's an important part. And we also have ornaments from my aunt. And I have a toque that's from my best friend that was gifted to me after she passed away that I wear. And so there's different ways to bring them in. Journaling has been very important to me, looking through photos and bringing them into that moment.
Danielle, anything else you wanted to add?
Yeah, I think Tara gave a pretty good extensive list there. But yeah, absolutely. And I think, it's also what is meaningful for you and your individual family. And that might look, really unique or maybe not like maybe people might expect. And so if that's a loved one and maybe, their favorite thing was, I don't know, like rocks or something, something random or maybe very unique to that person, it doesn't always have to be, like lighting a candle or doing something maybe that we would.
For my one friend, it's golf balls.
Sure, yeah. So kind of creative and unique that way. And what is symbolic of that person or that experience that you are trying to bring it into this present moment, like Tara was saying, there's this void now, there's this emptiness. And so what is going to allow that presence to exist in this present moment as, we know physically they're not going to be there.
Even their favorite meal, making that is really nice. Something they enjoyed over the holidays is nice.
Yeah, that I'm taking notes for all these things. Jennifer, I want to bring you in here right now. Jennifer Kroll is the minister at Broadway United Church in Regina. Jennifer, you've been listening along. Is there anything that stood out to you so far before we get into the stuff that you're offering this year?
Well, first of all, I just want to say thank you, both of you, for sharing your experiences and your loss and your ability to cope and to continue on. And I think that I really loved the conversation about like what I would call ritual, things that we do to help bring us into connection with the person that we've lost or the experience that has been painful. Like lighting the candle, like making that wreath, and how important that is. And that's something that in the church that we try to help people find those things and to connect in those ways. And that's part of what the Blue Christmas service is.
I mean, we've been talking a lot about grief for loved ones who have died, but obviously there's a lot of different kinds of grief people experience. When you're planning your Blue Christmas service, how do you frame it for people?
Well, like you said, there is so many things that people are grieving, and some of it is individual, but some of it is societal too, and just the world that we live in. And the fact that we're watching news cycles that are devastation after devastation, and people feel hopeless, and they need something that gives them hope or comfort or the ability to sit in that grief. And so when we offer a Blue Christmas service, I'm thinking about all of that. I'm thinking about the person that had just suffered a loss. I'm thinking about someone who is grieving because they don't have the relationship with their adult children that they want to have. I'm thinking about the person who's lost their job, the person who has family overseas that can't get to Canada, the person this is their first time in Canada. I'm thinking about all these things and trying to provide an opportunity for people to feel what they feel. And I think that in our society, so much of the time we're told to get over grief. And part of my job is to help people journey through it, and to acknowledge it in however they need to, because it is so personal, as both of the other ladies have talked about, that their journey is going to be different than someone else's journey. And sometimes people come to the church when they've never been religious before, but all of a sudden something has happened in their life and they just want to be able to find meaning or to find comfort. And so a Blue Christmas is very different than a typical worship service, because you're thinking about so much.
Yeah, describe it. If people like, I've never stepped foot in a church in my life, and that actually is very intimidating to me. If someone decided to come to your service tomorrow night in Regina, or one of these other services that are happening across the province, what might they expect?
Yeah. So a Blue Christmas service, the way that we do it at Broadway United Church, is there's time for quiet, there's prayer, there's poetry, there's scripture, there's listening to songs that are being sung for us, and there's opportunity to light candles. And one of the things that we do is that people can write what it is that they are grieving on pieces of paper, and they are offered up in like a collection plate, a basket that goes around. And I don't read them, but I pray over them. And sometimes that feels good for people, knowing that they've said what needs to be said. They've said the thing that they can't say out loud, and that someone is holding that in prayer.
I'm Nicole Huck, and you are listening to a special Blue Christmas edition of Blue Sky, where we are holding space for all the emotions that you might be having this time of year. It is a time of joy, and it can be a time of grief for people, whether that's grieving the loss of actual humans, or whether it's grieving relationships, or just loneliness and isolation that people might be feeling. So if you found this time of year challenging and you want to share a little bit about your own experience and how you've managed to maybe hold space for those emotions, or maybe create some new traditions, I would love to hear from you. So you can call 1-800-716-2221, or you can email bluesky@cbc.ca. We have a few people sitting by with me who are very, very well equipped to help deal with whatever emotions might arise. So I'm grateful to have these wonderful humans in studio with me. My colleague Heidi Adder moved to Labrador several years ago, but she's back in Regina right now, working remotely so that she can spend time with her mom. Now, her mom, Julie, has an aggressive cancer, and the family is preparing themselves that this may be the last Christmas that they get to spend together. I sat down with Heidi to talk about her mom and how she's navigating this season.
My mom, Julie, is one of the most incredible people I've ever met in my life, and she is currently having treatment for cancer. Unfortunately, she had a stroke in 2019 that she's very public about after her stroke and her healing journey. And now with this, because of that previous, we're fully expecting that this is her last Christmas. And at the same time, it is my baby niece's first birthday on Christmas Day.
Okay.
So it is a Christmas where it's filled with a lot of lasts and a lot of firsts all at once.
I know that you're quite an intentional person, and you do make time to carve out the space. I know that you have a lot of demands on you as well as a caretaker, and you're working and, all of the things as well. Probably you don't have as much space as you'd like to just be able to actually process what you're experiencing. But what are some of the things that you're doing knowing that grief and joy are all in the same basket this time of year for you?
It's a great question. There's a lot of pressure for this time of year to be this joyous time. All the songs talk about joy. It's an amazing time, and it's happy, and you feel the feeling of the spirit of Christmas. But this time is incredibly challenging. I think that I have cried in my car more times than I can count. Occasionally you just kind of want to scream at the world. But then at other times, you look at this woman who raised you and you see her looking up at the Christmas lights. And it's just this wave of joy. And how lucky am I to get to have a last Christmas with her? It's a lot of, I've been calling it a whiplash, where you feel this is going to be the last one. I need to make it special. I need to do everything that I can. And then the whiplash to when you're sitting there using the fancy cups that are reserved for the fancy tea parties, and you're just having tea with someone. That almost means more than any big grand gestures that you could give someone. So it's a whiplash. And initially, I tried to fight it. I tried to say, you know what, we're going to only feel joy. This is going to be a great time of year. It's going to be a party. Yeah, let's do it.
How'd that go for you?
It did not go well.
Yeah.
Did not go well. Broke down so fast. Because when you try to force joy, you're not giving your brain that chance to say, this is really hard and this is not going to be easy. And trying to push down those emotions almost seems to give them more strength and more power. Whereas when you feel them and you go, she always loved Christmas, and we're going to be preparing for the next 40 years of my life, the next 60 years of my niece and nephew's life without her at Christmas. So let's spend that extra time. Let's linger at the door. Let's forget something and go back in. Trying to pretend that it's only a joyous time made it incredibly hard. But acknowledging that this is going to suck. There's going to be some really hard times. I'm going to cry. Everyone's going to cry. She's going to cry. We're all going to cry. But just sitting in those feelings has made it so much easier.
What cues are you taking from your mom? Has she given you permission to feel the things?
Yeah, I'm really lucky that she raised us to be very emotionally aware adults, where she raised us to say, like, okay, what are you feeling? What are, like, 3 emotions kind of thing that you're feeling right now? What are some things that you can touch? What can you see? Like, being very aware of grounding ourselves. So there are times when we're talking about something and grief will just hit me, because it is a grief when you're watching someone that you love go through it. It's a grief. It's grieving. And I'll just start tearing up, and she'll almost even pause what she's talking about, take my hand, we'll kind of sit, we'll kind of cry for a minute, and then when we're ready, we'll go right back to talking about the latest Christmas concerts that her friends are in. I'm incredibly lucky that she holds space for me and I hold space for her. You know, you always, when someone is battling something like this, you hope for the best. You're dreaming of that miracle. But you also plan for the reality. And so it's almost holding space and talking about how, you know, when she's 87, you know, we're going to do this and we'll probably celebrate. But also acknowledging that she's only 64 and we're dealing with all this now. It comes in waves, and I'm so lucky that I can just take her cue and how she's feeling, and she holds space for me and I hold space for her, and honestly, that has been the best Christmas gift.
I mean, you're still in the thick of things, but what do you feel like what wisdom do you think that you've gained so far from this experience with your mom and being with her as she dies?
I think it is that feeling of not trying to pretend. It almost seems like with modern days and social media and small talk that we want to put out this highlight reel to the world. We want to, you know, show people that our lives are really great and we're doing amazing, and look at our latest vacation photos and look at this cool thing my kid did. You know, there's this intention to try to put out this highlight reel to the world. And this has been so grounding that it is tough. And in sharing that, when I'm talking to people and on social media, I was not prepared for the amount of people who reached out saying, like, I'm actually having a really tough time right now too.
I was going to say, Heidi, you've always been quite honest on social media about the triumphs and the struggles. And I think a lot of people do, yes, there's the highlight reel, and there's like, this is the other stuff that only I just talk about in person and I would never share with people. But you're intentional about that, about sharing some of the challenges. And why is that important to you?
It's important because we all face them, and it can feel so isolating if we think that everyone else is having a really great time and a really great year, and it's just us that's struggling. And it can feel so isolating, and you can feel so alone. And I felt that too, especially when this was first happening. But I didn't realize how many of my friends lost their parents to cancer. Even 2 years ago, one of my friends did, and I had no idea because I didn't know. And we are so worried about appearing happy and appearing positive that we're so scared when all this scary stuff happens and we don't share it with people because we're scared that they're going to think we're weak, that they're going to think, lesser of us. When in reality, life is hard. Life is a nightmare sometimes when you watch people that you love go through these things. And being honest with each other, even honest with strangers, it can make it feel so much less isolating, and it can make it feel almost easier to carry. Because if you're carrying all of this in your own backpack and you're trying to keep that backpack hidden from other people, it's heavy. And being able to share open and honestly with people is taking a moment to set that bag down and other people carry it for you, even for a little bit. And it's incredibly helpful, and it makes you feel so much less alone.
Well, Heidi, thank you for sharing your experience today. I'm hoping that this hour of radio helps other people maybe set down their backpack for a little bit and know that they're not alone. So thank you.
Thank you for having me.
That was my colleague and friend Heidi Adder sharing her experience navigating terminal illness with her mother, Julie. It's big conversations that we're having today on Blue Sky, and I just want our listeners to know that you can be part of this conversation as well. If you have something that you want to contribute, you can call 1-800-716-2221, or you can email bluesky@cbc.ca, or you can just cuddle up by your radio and listen. If that's all you need to, that's totally fine. But I have three people with me right now who are helping people navigate grief and loss and trauma on the regular. And they've been being mindful about what extra supports people might need at this time of year as well. So I want to give an opportunity for everybody. But Tara Ossoff, who has the podcast You're Meant to Be Here, channeling her own experience and wisdom into sharing. Tara, Heidi was talking about being honest, I guess, on social media, even about some of the challenges. Did that resonate with you, that part?
Yeah, definitely. On my own social media, I'm very honest about my feelings. I talk a lot about sadness and grief and happiness and joy and life and fulfillment, but I think it's very freeing and it does lighten the load to be able to be honest. And I think we want to mask sadness and we want to have a quick fix for it. But sometimes sadness is the whole point. It is what can open us up to feel different emotions and more compassion and joy, as I shared before. So I think it's an important part of the lesson of grief is feeling that.
And what kind of response have you had from people who've listened to your podcast and maybe feel, okay, that resonated with me?
Yeah, I'm actually pretty honored that the podcast is up for a big podcast award this year. And, before it's only a year and a half old and it's listened to in almost 30 different countries and without a ton of promotion. And I think it's because it resonates with people that, and I play a curious host, and I have different types of guests on talking about their own experience, whether it's doctors or psychologists or people who have gone through things. And I think the reason why the podcast is doing so well is because it's honest, vulnerable stories, and we're just craving that deep connection to people when we're living so surfacely, as the previous guest was just saying, on social media, this highlight reel, and that's just not reality. And when we can be vulnerable and be ourselves, it allows us to be fully human, and that's the whole point.
Thank you. Jennifer Krall, minister at Broadway United Church here in Regina. You've been listening. You heard Heidi. What was standing out to you?
I think it's so important for people to be able to feel what they're feeling and to not feel like they have to carry something alone, like what she was saying with the backpack, and to know that there are opportunities and people who will listen, people like Danielle, opportunities like Blue Christmas services, places where you can go where you don't have to carry it alone anymore, where you don't have to pretend that everything's okay, but you have permission in a safe place to just let yourself feel whatever it is you're feeling. I think that's so crucial and brave for people to be able to do, because it's hard to let people in.
What are some of the, I mean, not everybody, you're coming at it through potentially a religious or a spiritual lens. Not everybody identifies with that. What do you think that people from any faith background, what tools can you help offer?
Well, like many that have been said already, finding something that you can do that brings you closer to the person or the situation that is difficult, writing in a journal, lighting a candle, finding your own ways to do little rituals at home, finding people to talk to, and knowing that you're not alone, and sharing your story in whatever that might mean. It might mean just in your private journal, or it might mean talking to a professional or a friend. Sharing a cup of tea that was mentioned is so healing, and finding ways to journey through it instead of pushing it aside. And it's going to look different for everyone, but trying to figure out what works for you, what feels good for you. And I think also moving your body and going for a walk or stretching or shaking it off, dance, things like that can move grief through your body in ways that other practices can't.
It's interesting you say that, because one thing when Heidi was talking about how you can't force joy, it's true, but I was also just thinking about that whole idea of fake it till you make it in some circumstances, whether that means maybe having a shower even if you don't feel like it, or forcing yourself to go for a walk even if you'd rather just curl up in bed. I don't know. I'm not an expert here, but
yeah, I could even say so. Clinically, we would call that behavioral activation, which is basically the fancy way of
for fake it till you make it.
Fake it till you make it, and that's actually a clinical tool we use a lot of time with folks who are experiencing depression, or maybe some of those low moods. Is just that idea that we don't have that motivation or maybe that dopamine that's just kind of building that for ourselves to want to do those activities. So when we start or kind of force ourselves to do those activities, our body and kind of our neurology will catch up to the activity that we're doing. So yes, there's a fine balance between, we want to honor grief and hold space for complicated feelings and sadness, and we don't want to, force trying to get to joy. But also the understanding that sometimes, especially with physical movement, there's a lot of regulation that happens within physical activity, and, same with dopamine and endorphins and all of those really good things for our body that can help lift our moods.
So maybe it's the dance party in your kitchen instead of the party that you were going to go to.
Yeah.
That's safer. Now, I want to talk about kids, because I know that all of you have kids in your lives. I know that Caring Hearts, I know kids who have gone to Caring Hearts for grief counseling, whether that be the summer camp or whether it is just this time of year because they know that it's going to be a tough one because they lost grandma, on Christmas last year or whatnot. Let's talk about kids and how you can help support kids through some of these difficult times. And Tara, I might want to start with you on this one. And you're like, I'm not the expert, but just because I know that with your friend who has passed more recently, that her children are a big part of your life.
Yeah, they are. And actually, all of their birthdays fall in December, too. And, going through those first Christmases and moments without their mom is incredibly difficult. And I think it's confusing to them. And having volunteered at the bereavement center before, they had a summer camp. And I think it's important, and just like adults, to give them ways to physically bring their person into their life, whether that's building something that reminds them of their person or whatnot. But, the boys, my promise to her was that I would see them every 3 months, and I haven't broken that promise. They don't live here in Regina, so I have to drive, but it's an honor to be part of their life and to still be part of hers through them. I make sure to do things that she loved and also talk a lot about her with them and make sure they know that she loved them.
Do you have anything planned for this season with them?
Yeah, so I'm going to be going to a hockey game with them. Last year, we did the same thing. They got to meet. The Flames were amazing. They let us meet some of the players. And
wow.
yeah. I hope to take them. It was a gift from a friend, and I hope to be able to do that again, something special with them like that this year as well. I think it's important. Christmas was so hard for me for so long, and then it got to a place where I got to be happy again, and I want them to slowly start to build happy memories around Christmas.
Danielle?
Yeah, I think like a tool that we can use, I think, just universally across age demographics is holding emotional tolerance and kind of building that skill. Maybe if you're someone who's trying to support a loved one. As therapists, we actually take school and lessons on how to hold space for complicated feelings, but in the day-to-day world, not everyone has that.
No.
And
no, we don't all.
No, and it's also our human nature to really try to avoid those discomfort, the uncomfortable emotions like anger, sadness, frustration. We want to run away from those things, but the more we can allow space for those to exist and kind of deal with our own dysregulation, our own discomfort around what if I say the wrong thing, or, this is really uncomfortable for me to sit here and watch you cry.
Is there the wrong thing? I mean, we do hear from people about like this, somebody said this, or like, it's all going to be fine.
Yeah.
And like, what is the wrong thing?
Well, I'll tell you what, you can call Caring Hearts and I'll come to a training for your organization or for
but
your
not
family.
To say when someone's grieving.
And that is a part of actually what we do, because there is a lot of, it's again going to be kind of person specific and maybe how they're interpreting the meaning of what you're saying or some of the language you're using. But even when we're talking about language, like when we're talking about suicide loss, saying, someone died by suicide instead of using terminology like someone committed suicide, like it was a crime or an act that they did that has these connotations to it. So when we can be really careful around language, just in general, I mean, there's a lot to unpack there. The short answer is probably yes. There are some better and worse things we can say to folks. But even kind of going back to children, thinking about what's developmentally appropriate ways to talk to them. And so if we're talking to a kid who's maybe 6 or 7 or under, using kind of short, concise phrases that's easy for them to understand, like, grandma's not here, that's sad. That's okay. When we're talking about, a little bit older developmentally, maybe like 8 to 12, or we're having more of that gray conceptualization coming into their development, able to kind of more grasp those abstract concepts like afterlives or, complexities and nuances. And so we can have more in-depth conversations as development continues on. But I think the overarching theme I've kind of heard between all of us here today is just having space for those conversations to exist. So not pretending there's this elephant in the room and we're not going to talk about it, saying like this.
Can you give me a script?
Sure. Sure. So is there a certain maybe like age demographic or just in general if you were like a friend or family?
How about a 9-year-old and a 4-year-old?
Sure. Yeah. So actually, so I was just dealing with pet loss in my personal life. We had to put our dog down last weekend. And so I have a 6-year-old at home. So kind of, language that we use with him is, our dog isn't here anymore, and that's sad, and we miss his sounds in the house. And, also when your child, so my 6-year-old says something maybe like a little unhinged, like, oh, we should get a new dog, or, this.
Is that unhinged?
Yeah. Well, and I also want to normalize that kids will interpret grief or say things that maybe might catch you off guard sometimes that maybe you don't think is really sensitive towards your grief as a grown-up, and they may just drop a nugget and run away. And so
I'm so curious about what you're talking about right now.
Sure. So let's say, and even some kids I've worked with, so I'll give some examples. So let's say
I have a real example too. Of
Sure.
this.
We're going to talk about.
When my brother had passed away, my spouse at the time, his niece, had come up to me, and I was still in the shock phase, and she was maybe 3, and she came up to me and she put her hand on my leg and said, "Your brother, he died." And I said, "Yeah, he did." And she said, "That means he's not on earth anymore and you're never going to see him again." And that was devastating to me because it felt so real that she understood it. And it came from this sweet place, but it was like this jarring moment for me. The reality that someone 3 years old had understood what my brain was still processing was a really difficult experience, but also beautiful in a way too.
Yeah.
That somebody was talking to her.
Someone had told her what that meant.
Yeah. what that means.
Yes.
Yeah, and I think actually, so you're talking about a script, so that really prompted something for me, is that also being honest with your kids about death. And so the fact that, it's trying to avoid terminology like they went to sleep, because if for someone developmentally under 6, well, then they might develop a fear of going to sleep because they can't grasp that, well, what if I die when I go to sleep? Or kind of magic pretend that maybe this person's just going to disappear and I'm not going to see them anymore. So really using language that's kind of factual, relevant to the actual scenario. Because like you said, like your 3-year-old understood in that moment what was happening for you.
Yeah.
There's so much, and we could probably talk for another hour, but we are coming up to the end of the show here. I just wanted to give everybody just one last opportunity. If you would, you kind of have about 20 seconds each. But Jennifer, I will start with you. Parting thought.
If anyone can take anything from this, I just want them to know they're not alone. That there's so many people who are also grieving, and there's so many people who care. And there's a lot of love out there that's ready for you and waiting for you.
That's Jennifer Carl. She's a minister at Broadway United Church. Tomorrow night at 7 p.m., there's a Blue Christmas service there. Everybody is invited. Danielle Renault, registered psychotherapist and director of education and programming through Caring Hearts. Danielle, if people are interested in finding out more about Caring Hearts, where should they go?
Yeah, so definitely you can check out our website. So that's www.caringheartsask.ca. Our phone number is 306-523-2780. And I'll also just plug that the government of Saskatchewan recently partnered with us for $200,000 a year to provide folks with no-cost counseling. And so if that's a barrier for you out there and you are in need of service, please do reach out. We'd love to support you that way. And yeah, also mentioning our kids' grief camps that we do twice a year, more specialized and focus on that child and youth grief.
Thank you so much. And Tara Osipoff is the host of You're Meant to Be Here podcast. Tara, where can people find it?
You can find it on Spotify or on Apple Podcasts.
Awesome. So take a listen. I'm just very grateful for everybody being part of this conversation today. And I hope that some listeners out there got something out of this conversation.